Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about how to perform taps and why this bugle call or trumpet call is so important. But first, each and every Friday I'm releasing a new video at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, all things trumpet with a focus on fundamentals, performance, pedagogy, and audition strategies. Please press that subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner here, as it helps the channel and in turn alerts you of new content. And it is my hope that this content is helpful to you all. So during the 2000s, I had the honor of performing taps at Arlington National Cemetery over 500 times as a member of the United States Air Force Band in Washington, D.C. In this video, I'll provide a little history and context and some performance tips and throw a few performances in there as well. Let's kick this video off with a performance of taps. In the Air Force Band, I had the privilege to work with fellow Air Force Band member Jari Villanueva, widely considered the country's foremost expert on military bugle calls, particularly the call of taps, which is sounded at military funerals. Villanueva has been featured on the History Channel and in film. He can be seen as a bugler in this clip here from the 2003 Civil War movie Gods and Generals.
Colonel, 20th Maine to the front.
Battalion, shoulder, up, left, face, five file right, march.
The bugler played a key role during the American Civil War, signaling commands to the troops. These calls are still used on military installations today. In 2007, Jari was the first active duty military member inducted into the Buglers Hall of Fame. Let's check out this next clip with Jari talking about the history of taps.
For 150 years, the bugle call taps has been heard throughout the United States. First developed as the call for lights out, it soon transformed into that call that's heard at military funerals. Today, the call is heard virtually in every corner of our nation, sounded at funerals for veterans, those who have served our country. In 1862, Union General Daniel Butterfield and his brigade bugler, Oliver Wilcox Norton, revised an earlier bugle call to create the 24 notes we know today as taps. The new call quickly spread throughout the Union Army and was soon used even by Confederates to signal the end of the day. Later that same year, at a battlefield funeral, Captain John Tybalt chose to forego firing the customary volleys over the grave for fear that he might rouse the enemy. The captain chose the sounding of taps as the most appropriate substitute. Today, sounding taps at ceremonies is the most sacred duty a bugler can perform. When I sound taps at a funeral, I'm sometimes approached by family members who wish to thank me for being part of the service. To answer "you're welcome" seems inadequate. Instead, I always reply, "It is my honor."
In 2015, Jari started Taps Across America, and the event went national Memorial Day 2020 as it was featured on CBS News with Steve Hartman. Villanueva is largely responsible for organizing taps to be formed across the United States at 3 p.m. each and every Memorial Day. On Memorial Day, trumpet players across the country are encouraged to sound taps from their front porch, outside of their homes, and in their neighborhoods to honor U.S. military members who died in service to the United States. If you're a trumpet player, I strongly encourage you to participate in this annual event. This next video is my son Silas and I performing a unison taps from my front porch Memorial Day 2021. Perhaps the most famous taps of all time was performed by Army Trumpeter Keith Clark at President John F. Kennedy's funeral. On the day of the funeral, Clark stood in the rain for 3 hours on a chilly late November day. He chipped the sixth note, something very easy to do, especially in the weather climate and in those circumstances. To many, including myself, the tiny mistake was a poignant symbol of the American nation in mourning. That small mistake made this rendition all the more powerful. Let's take a listen. And now for some performance tips. Keep in mind that I'm approaching this from the angle of someone who is auditioning for a military band. Even if you're a part-time trumpet player playing from your porch on Memorial Day, I think these tips can be helpful to you as well too. With regard to taps at auditions for military jobs, you should take this one very seriously. You can tell so much about intonation, sound, and musicality. If these areas lack in your sounding of taps, it can be an automatic disqualifier. In my time in the military, no one trumpet player sounded taps the exact same way. There's a little room to add a little personal touch. But a great taps has these elements: a beautiful sound, a musical arch, and a touch of natural vibrato, as if you were singing it. Earlier I mentioned how there's some freedom allowed, but it's important that there's a rhythmic underlying. I like to think of the rhythm in terms of eighth note subdivisions. For example, the opening pickups are like a dotted quarter note, eighth note, and then the fermata note. Same thing with the second statement. A consistent rhythm throughout helps organize the call for an even more stirring rendition. Let's take a listen to the first couple of statements. In particular, listen to the rhythm. As far as where to breathe, that is open to interpretation as well. I've heard great players breathe in different spots. I can speak to where I breathe, but the biggest thing in my opinion is to not have gaping holes where the breath takes place. You want to keep the musical line going throughout, and the breath can't get in the way of that. I breathe after all the fermatas, including the first one. Many players won't breathe until the second fermata. Both are acceptable. I also like to grab a quick breath before the pickups of the third fermata to keep my air supply up for the long fermata note. Then the last two breaths are pretty obvious after the fermata and then before the last three notes. It's important to note that the Marines play a different rhythm in the middle section. They play a dotted rhythm, and the other services play a straight eighth note throughout there. The last note is a very important one. I start with a straight tone, add a little bit of vibrato, and try to fade away to nothing. Let's take a listen. I hope you find this video helpful in providing some context and setting the stage to play a beautiful taps. Thanks so much for watching.